The Kaiser Report, the show that makes you 10 feet tall, sexy to everyone you meet, and infinitely rich. That's right. Stacey?
And also very lucky because I believe this episode is KR1088, episode 1088. And I know 8 is a lucky number in China. Hopefully 1088 is also lucky.
No, we're going to Macau right after this. I'm going to take it out, place it on red. This is it. I'm putting it all in Macau.
Just like our backdrop. It's all red.
Red is our number. Red, China, Macau, 88. It's all happening. I'm going to meet Bobby Lee in China, the crypto mogul. We're going to go to Macau. He's going to take like $500 million in Bitcoin that he's got, add it to my $47, and we're going to put it all on the roulette wheel, and we're going to go big.
Now, I want to turn to an article from James Howard Kunstler at kunstler.com. And basically, he's talking about the fact that Americans put it all on red. The red states, MAGA hat, make America great again. They voted for Trump. And the reason why they voted for Trump is the financialization of the consequences of that. And it's all funny in light of what also happened last week of this repeated thing of everybody, all the markets sitting around waiting for the central bank, waiting for the Wizard of Oz, waiting for the Wizard of Oz to raise rates, lower rates, raise rates. What is the guidance this Wizard of Oz is going to offer us? Well, the fact is the Wizard of Oz can do nothing about price discovery, and that is coming soon. Things to come. As our politicians creep deeper into a legalistic wilderness hunting for phantoms of Russian collusion, nobody pays attention to the most dangerous force in American life, the unraveling financialization of the economy. And what is financialization? Well, this is how James Howard Kunstler defines it. Financialization is what happens when the people in charge create colossal sums of money out of nothing by issuing loans, aka debt, and then cream off stupendous profits from the asset bubbles, interest rate arbitrages, and other opportunities for swindling that the artificial wealth presents. It was a kind of magic trick that produced monuments of concentrated personal wealth for a few and left the rest of the population drowning in obligations from a stolen future. The future is now upon us.
I mean, this is what I call interest rate apartheid in America. If you're below the interest rate apartheid line, then if you go to the bank and you say, lend me $10,000, they would then give you this money at a cost of 8, 9, 10%. You know, if it's a payday loan, it could be 20%, 50%, 60% interest rates. If you're above the interest rate apartheid wall, then you go to the bank and you say, I'd like to borrow $1 billion. And the bank effectively loans you that $1 billion at 0% interest, and it's a forgivable loan. In other words, you never have to pay it back. And that's not an exaggeration. If you have a certain place in society, if you're entitled in this society, you live in the right area, not on the Bantustan of the middle class, you can get forgivable loans for almost any amount at 0% interest rate. And that's the financialization. So when the bank makes that $1 billion loan, it's not coming from deposits in the bank. They simply create a entry in their computer system, and they say, okay, now this $1 billion, it now has been created. This exists. It never has to be paid back. And he's correct in that sense. What he's incorrect about, in my opinion, is that we've seen the financialization collapse in 2008. And the response amongst the central banks around the world, Federal Reserve Bank, Bank of England, Bank of Japan, European Central Bank, was to make these loans to the privileged class. Not for $1 billion, though. They made loans of over $15 trillion to the bankers in America and the United Kingdom and in Europe to pay down on their bond deposits that were technically insolvent. Remember, they said it's not an insolvency problem, it's a liquidity problem, even though it was an insolvency problem. So my point being that, do the central banks have another $15 trillion to create in this way? Yes, they do. So that's why I don't agree that this is the time for the financialization bubble to implode, to collapse. I don't think it's time yet. These banks have another $15 trillion to create. The European Central Bank can leverage this up by another $5 trillion easily. Bank of Japan is a never-ending fountain of free cash at 0% interest rate. So this has a ways to go.
He does say that financialization has done some interesting things, namely New York City. He said if you look at it, Brooklyn especially, all this money has redeveloped the city. You lived here in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and it stayed the same cruddy, rat-infested, crime-infested city. And now it's like la-la land of great food, great coffee, amazing buildings, apartments, millions and millions of dollars apartments. And that's one thing it has added, but it's geographically concentrated. He then goes on to say what's happened with all those who voted for MAGA. Quite a bit of that wealth was extracted from asset stripping the rest of America, where financialization was absent, kind of a national distress sale of the flyover places and the people in them. That dynamic, of course, produced the phenomenon of President Donald Trump, the distilled essence of all the economic distress out there and the rage it entailed. The people of Ohio, Indiana, and Wisconsin were left holding a big bag of nothing, and they certainly noticed what had been done to them, though they had no idea what to do about it except maybe try to escape the moment-by-moment pain of their ruined lives with powerful drugs. He's saying that it was the hollowing out. They do need something. They do need some sort of like tier one capital to kind of like capitalize and leverage up these trillions of loans.
Well, as we discussed, the subprime market was drilled for huge banker bonuses, and then they now go into the subprime auto market, the student loan market. The Obamacare is a huge subsidy to the pharmaceutical industry. Look, America is essentially a huge graveyard, and it's, layered. The layer of the Native Americans, and on top of that, 100 million dead African slaves. And now onto the new layer on the American cemetery are white middle-class people. And that's the lives that have to be sacrificed for financialization. But is it going to stop? No. It would require somebody to take the central banker in America, Janet Yellen currently, and force her by any means necessary to start raising interest rates enough to increase the cost of fraud, to increase the cost of financialization, and that's not going to happen.
But Bloomberg News was also reporting on this. I want to show you the headline before I get to his summation from James Howard Kunstler. Prepare now for the end of the bull market. So they're also saying it, but not with as much creative language as James Howard Kunstler is able to use. But Kunstler is also a great observer of the American people and the wasteland that is our bad economics, from the bubbles to the suburbia. And I'm going to break a few times during the summation because it's quite long, but it is quite colorful. And now the rather pathetic false promises of President Trump, the whole MAGA thing, is unraveling at exactly the same time that the financialized economy is entering its moment of final catastrophic phase change. The monuments to wealth, especially the stock and bond portfolios and the presumed value of real estate investments, will surrender to a process you might call price discovery from hell, revealing their worth to be somewhere between little and nothing. Price discovery from hell, he reckons, will come up one day. You think it's another 15 trillion to go, but as you invented the technology called the
virtual specialist technology, or price discovery technology.
He says this is going to come no matter what Janet Yellen, whatever, all of the central bankers of the world, whatever they do to interest rates, however negative they might drive them in some parts of the world, however many assets they buy, the fact is price discovery will eventually arrive. No matter how, they could only put it off. They can't stop it.
What will happen to change the course of financialization, in my view, would be a catastrophic ecological phase change. For example, the Gulf Stream, which keeps Britain somewhat warm than its latitudinous compatriot Moscow, is the Gulf Stream. And the Gulf Stream is at threat of reversing course, and you'd have a complete and catastrophic shift in global weather patterns. Or you would have an ice sheet break off from one of the poles and sea levels rise an inch or two. And that will stop the financialization, and it will be in an eco-holocaust.
Well, he thinks just the mathematical essence of what our economy can
well, that's
sustain.
why I disagree with him, because there's no end to the amount of decimal points you can put on financialization. They're never going to run out of zeros to say that this bond is collateralized by a penny, a fraction of a penny, a fraction of a fraction, a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction. You can never run out of zeros.
You can't land on a fraction, though. You can't.
Well, despite what Dennis Hopper says in Apocalypse Now, it's more about what Marlon Brando said at the end, the horror. Or is he, he turns the camera, and the light's right here, the key light, and he's like, the horror. Was that a good Marlon Brando impression?
Yeah, yeah. And
not really.
It's all about the colonialization, right? And we're colonized by debt. And he says, James Howard Kunstler, this is who I'm reading. He says that the end of it, the price discovery from hell is arriving, and the accumulated monstrous debts of persons, corporations, and sovereign societies will be suddenly, shockingly, absolutely, and self-evidently unpayable, and the securities represented by them will be sucked into the kind of vortices of time-space depicted in movies about mummies and astronauts.
It's more about the colonization than the colonization. The amount of...
The semicolon?
Detritus / fecal matter that is collateralizing this mountain of financialization, this pyramid scheme is still growing as long as there's a will to collateralize. There's nothing stopping it. But
you saw his last sentence in your mind. Yeah. You were in this vortex because he did say, and all of a sudden, the avatars of that wealth will see their lives turn to bleep, just like the moiling Budweiser gulping OxyContin and rat-addled deplorables in the flat, boring parking lot wastelands of their ruined drive-in utopia saw their lives rendered into a brown and yellow slurry draining clockwise down the toilet of history. There you go.
Avatars are able to be collateralized and sold. Look at Pepe the Frog. Pepe the Frog is a meme coin. It's an avatar. That's what James Howard Kunstler is failing to see. I mean, I like my idea, the colonization. I mean, that's another neologism that I've concatenated on this very program for the folks out there in the audience who are watching this in airports and hotel rooms around the world. Some of them in compromising positions that they can collateralize and sell forward as a compromised position futures contract and probably make $1 billion and sell that to